Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and today we're going to be talking about the hard work of people who are trying to turn the city of Gary around and who have been there forever and really love the city and really want, believe that people there deserve to live healthy and full lives. So I'm really excited today to be joined by Carolyn McCrady, who is an officer in an organization. GARD is the acronym, Gary Advocates for Responsible Development. And you have been doing outstanding work with others too that I know and who have been around for a long time doing great work. I worked with Doreen Carey many years ago, and terrific. She's just a terrific advocate for the environment. So today, and specifically, we want to talk about a couple of the new industries that are trying to come into Gary. They all seem very opaque and their processes seem opaque. So I'm really interested to hear about those. So Carolyn, first tell us more about Gary. You've been there forever. You're a retired teacher from Gary Schools. And so you've been around for a long time. Tell us what it is you love about Gary and why you're doing this work.
Okay, well, I actually came to Gary in 1974 because there was a new mayor here. His name was Richard Gordon Hatcher. And I came here because I wanted to work for him. And ultimately, I was able to do that. I worked in the law department as an investigator, and then I worked in the press office as his assistant press secretary. So I got a very full view of what an administration that has the heart of the people in its actions and in its policies. And so I learned a lot about the city while I was there. I was very active in campaigns and got started in other campaigns, consumer advocacy with the Citizens Action Coalition. I was part of the anti-war movement, and so many challenges here in the city. But unfortunately, given our status as an environmental justice community, which of course we are because of over 100 years of industrial pollution that we have been enduring in our water, our air, and our soil, which has resulted in a lesser quality of life because people have become sick because of it, namely diseases of the lungs. So many of my students had asthma. All my stepchildren had asthma. A lot of people have cancer of the lungs and other kinds of cancer. So we are in a city that right now the Guardian, who did a big survey of impacted communities, says that we are the fourth. Our region is the fourth most polluted region in the country. And of course, Gary is at the heart of that. And so we are an environmental justice community. And even with that, there has never been a sustainable environmental justice movement that has functioned over time to try to curb the excesses of polluting industries and or to stop them. And so, this is the emergence of GARD and what it says and what it's doing is extremely important because we have at our core in our core beliefs that we must be sustainable, that Gary must come into a sustainable future, and that the idea of fossil fuels running our lives forever is not it's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable because it creates all kinds of problems for people, health outcomes, and it makes us less attractive as a community for people to come to. So, but what do I love about Gary? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We are the heart of the region. We have amazing history here, union history, political history. The people are resilient. This is a predominantly African American community with a core of progressive whites, who have aligned themselves in different times and space with progressive ideas and with the building of unions, with the building of people's organizations, and of course politically, with progressive mayors like Mayor Hatcher, and right now with the progressive candidate Eddie Melton, who hopefully will be elected as our new mayor tomorrow. So there's a lot to love in Gary. That I taught for 20 years in the Gary system, high school English and journalism. And they were some of the most wonderful days of my life. And so many of my students now I see who are doing amazing things. They are doctors and lawyers, and they're running offices in the unions, and they just they're real estate brokers. They're midwives. They're doing everything. And most of my Facebook friends are are my former students, and that's how I keep up with many of them. But I do see them. I saw a number of them yesterday at a political rally for Senator Melton. So, you know, we produce young people who need to have a reason to come back to Gary and live and work, and that is what we are working for, and that's what all people who want to see Gary returned as a leader of our region, with all of the full description of what a leader is in a community, in the region. And we are not scary Gary. I know a lot of white people like to come here and portray Gary as just a series of abandoned buildings. That is absolutely not true. We are a city of beautiful neighborhoods and beautiful people and resilient people, spiritual people, people who just keep on trying to do what is important and what is necessary, for everyone. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but
you could.
we
And,
are here to
Gary
talk
has
about
really
other
suffered
things.
some huge setbacks over the years. While it was, a thriving, city back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and even before that, the union-led workers movement and the mills there, the steel mills there in Gary,
Yeah.
really made a lot of, great, wonderful, profitable businesses, and the city was doing great. And then when a lot of those jobs left, Gary was left with a lot of real estate, and about half of the population that they
Well, let
had.
me say, Deb, that the jobs left in the 80s. That's when the big layoffs started. We had layoffs in a hospital closed, the Bud plant, which was an auto plant, closed. 6,000 workers lost their jobs. And of course, in the mills, because Black people were the first to be, the last to be hired, they were the first to be fired. So, but what preceded that was the white flight movement, engineered by banks and real estate companies after Richard Gordon Hatcher's election, and a new town was created to accept all these white people who were bamboozled into thinking they needed the city, that they needed to leave the city. And they made a lot of profit off of whites selling their homes for less, Blacks buying the same homes for more. And they just turned neighborhoods over, one after another. Then they redlined the entire city. You couldn't get a mortgage if you wanted to go, have a new business. You couldn't get a mortgage if you wanted to build a house. And then they disinvested. So that was the bank's disinvestment. But then, how are we going to bring new businesses here? If they can't get any money, to finance their operations. And then finally, when Merrillville was created, they built the mall.
Yes, yeah.
And then the businesses who were our anchors downtown left and went out to South Lake Mall. So it was pretty complete. The destruction was complete. And then, so we had all these abandoned homes that, whites left, and the businesses that were empty. And so Richard Gordon Hatcher had a job on his hands to try to deal with all the chaos that this created. First, a disinvestment, and then the creation of Merrillville, and then in the 80s, the downturn in the economy and the election of Ronald Reagan, who immediately cut money, aid to cities. And then we had, as I said before, all the layoffs in the mills, the closing of the Bud plant, the closing of St. Mary's Hospital. And we took so many hits that other communities did not. And so we're still the heart of the region. We're still Mother Gary, but we have a job on our hands. And I just want to say that, if and when Senator Melton is elected, he is the first candidate since Mayor Hatcher that has a plan and understands how to implement that plan. And that's why people are so excited about him, because it's not just talk. It's not just, as the mayor that's announced it, reimagining Gary. No, you can't reimagine without a plan. You have to have, if you want to reimagine, say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And this is what his campaign is about. What is it we're going to do, and how are we going to do it? And he's already passed a bipartisan bill in the state that would allow us to basically rebuild our downtown, which, we've never had this kind of investment from the state of Indiana ever in our city. And this is just absolutely historic. And then the strong possibility of being able to build a new convention center over where the casino is located at this point off of 8094. So there's a lot to look forward to. And so, but we have to get a grip on what industry is trying to do and what the state of Indiana at the same time is trying to saddle us with.
Great. So
Yeah.
wonderful. That is such a great story of history of Gary. That's really wonderful. But so now, I want to turn to that very subject, what industries are coming in. So you mentioned in 2015, there was, no, I forgot the name of Mawa. Am I saying it right?
Maya,
that's it. Right. Maya.
20,
And
yeah.
and this is kind of a new wave of industries that are claiming to be sustainable in some sort of, alternate definition of sustainable. And so there's Maya, and then now there's Fulcrum. So tell us about Maya. Tell us what it is they wanted to do and where they are in that process. And then we need to talk about Fulcrum. That's the really most urgent issue on our plate.
Right. Yeah. The thing about Maya is that, when they came to the city in 2016, they said that they wanted to start a recycling facility on land that was designated a floodplain that was controlled by the Little Calumet Basin Development Commission. And they said they wanted to do, cardboard and things, things that sound really, benign. And so the zoning gave them permission, and they even put together an ordinance that said that, they have permission to do this. Well, somehow all of that cardboard stuff, that recycling stuff, turned into solid waste. They started out by saying they were going to bring 7 trucks a day in and out, and now it's up to, based on the tonnage of garbage they say they want to bring in, now it's up to 300 a day. And putting it on in an area that's already polluted to the extent that that area is in the 80th percentile, according to EPA. And I can read to you a letter that that Mr. Mooney, who is at the Region 5 EPA division, that he sent to IDEM, which is the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, and they decide who gets an air permit and who doesn't. And so he sent them this letter. He sent it to Jenny Acker, who's the chief of the permits branch of IDEM. And basically he said, the EPA has determined the proposed location of the facility raises potential environmental justice concerns. The values for 10 of the 12 environmental justice indexes for these tracts in these neighborhoods around which the facility is sited exceed the 80th percentile. So, it's very close to 8094. And as we know that, we have emissions and we have particulates that are, raised from the travel of trucks and cars. And so basically he said, if you do this, you're courting danger. I mean, those are my words, but what he was saying was, you really need to look at this very seriously. He said they issued a news source. I'm sorry. They understand that the facility has not yet been built, but they recommend that IDEM review the construction permit, including emissions, which IDEM did not do because they don't have any emissions to even talk about. I mean, how can you scrutinize something that hasn't happened? And then they also said they recommend that IDEM conduct an environmental justice analysis, which they could do right from the start, just like the EPA has done. They understand the area is already saturated, and now you want to add more to it because you're going to be going for an air permit. So in any case, we don't quite understand, and I don't know if they quite understand where it is they're going, but this whole thing with Maya is about two people from East Chicago getting access to land that is controlled by the Little Cal Commission, and being able to do something with it. That keeps changing. Even the area that the ordinance said they wanted to locate on is different than the area now that they say they want to be on. In addition to which, they are right across from a school. In addition to that, the road that they will be traveling down is built on a floodplain, and there are ditches on each side. And so how it could sustain that level of truck traffic, over time, I would say over a week's time, is just, you just see that the road would probably collapse. So we're not sure exactly where it is they're going with this. The whole idea seems very, very untenable. However, IDEM keeps giving them permits. Now, they gave them their original operating permit, and then they didn't do anything with it. Okay. Well, when you don't do anything with it for 5 years, they're not supposed to renew the operating permit. But in fact, they did that. So we objected to that, and they held a hearing, and 30 people got up and spoke, including the mayor of the city of Gary, the current mayor, that we did not want this in our city. And all kinds of a range of people spoke, people in the neighborhood, people, who are environmentalists, people who are into water quality. And it was as if no one had said anything. They did their job, they held the hearing, and that was it. So then IDEM dismissed both the city's petition and Doreen's petition on behalf of GARD, dismissed it just out of hand. And so the city filed an appeal with the district court on that decision. We did not on Maya, because at that time we didn't have an attorney to do that. And let me say that GARD began as an ad hoc group, and we are slowly building into something more than an ad hoc group. But we put up a great fight,
So the status of Maya now is that they are fully permitted and could start construction anytime?
Well, the only thing that holds them up is the appeal in the district court by the city of Gary. And so recently the city council has said that they are going to introduce a resolution against Maya, and on the 16th of this month. And so we'll see what happens with that. We're asking the city council to do a few things in regard to Maya, other than just take a strong stand against them continuing. But if they have to start over, which would be optimum, if they have to start over in the process, then I would say we have a good chance of stopping them from being there. The other thing is, they tried to they tried to transfer their lease to another company from Germany called Calabria. This was about a year ago. And Calabria came to a little Cal meeting, and from what I understand, the commissioners were not impressed with them because I think some of them supported what Maya was doing. They wanted Maya to stay, and they weren't sure how they felt about this German company. But in any case, if they're so committed to wanting to bring in, 24,000 tons of garbage every day and process it and turn it into what they call refuse devised fuel, then why are they trying to lease the land that they hold the lease on to another company? So it could be a matter of speculation that they're involved in. I don't know. And that's just my personal opinion. I
Well,
don't
and
know.
I have to take an issue, with this, these proposed ideas, like turning, what recyclables into fuel.
Yeah,
I mean, you and I both are quite aware of, things that are emerging industries and in the alternative energy arena. And, this is such a sketchy approach
it is
that,
sketchy.
and it's just not been proven. And they think they can come into communities like Gary and say, we bring X number of jobs.
There you go.
So you really, should have us come in. And the town city officials want to be the person, the administration that brings jobs, that helps, people get jobs. But it's just so sketchy, and their processes are so opaque. And really, as you said, I mean, none of that really overcomes the fact that you are already, Gary, the air in Gary is already saturated with all
Yes.
kinds of pollutants. And
Yeah.
introducing, hundreds of more, diesel operated trucks,
Right.
that emit the PM 2.5, particulate matter that is just most dangerous to people because it's small enough that gets all the way into the tiniest parts of your lungs, and can cause such damage. And of course, it just fouls the air, as you can see. And so, bringing all that in, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. But yeah, IDEM doesn't seem to have any qualms about doing that. And all the environmental work I've done over the years, I will say that, Northwest Indiana in general has always kind of been the stepchild of IDEM. And they never really had a whole lot of interest in protecting this area. And that was before we called it sacrifice zones. But that's become a really appropriate term in my view. So
Yes.
okay, so the status of Maya is that we're waiting on this city appeal of the
Mhm.
permit to find out what happens next. So tell us now about the newest player in Gary, Fulcrum. Where do they come from? What do they do? And what's going to happen to Gary if they get there?
Ooh, yeah. Well, they're an outfit out of California. They're uh, I think that they are getting on the train of sustainable fuels because it's being financed by states and government, and the Biden administration and people. Trump, they were all advocates for this kind of sustainable fuel that could be produced from plastic and garbage and all the kinds of things that we want to get rid of. Instead of throwing it in the ocean, we just turn it into fuel.
But we got to
Or
be
instead
careful
of,
when we use the word sustainable there, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely. And
they're
I'm not,
saying
I'm,
sustainable because
yes.
they're saying, oh, it's sustainable because we're taking garbage and turning it into something useful. But that in itself does not make it sustainable.
Well, and also no one, not in this country, and no one internationally has been able to do that on any kind of prolonged basis. There have been some companies that have started up and stopped, started up and stopped. No one has been able to do it, particularly because of the fact that When you're talking about creating a feedstock, and that's when they take the garbage and they sort it and they put the 30% plastic, as Fulcrum is proposing. When they put that in there and then they dry it out and then they run it through this biorefinery that they want to put on our lake, that is where they basically turn it into a gas, and then they sell that to the airlines. It's called syngas. You have to have uh, a consistent flow of garbage. It has to be the same all the time. Otherwise, the emissions will change every single time you have a new load of garbage. And we all know your garbage changes every week, and so does mine. I have different things in there. And that's true of all garbage. And so the flow of garbage, what the source of what they say they want to do is not consistent. So then you cannot get consistent emission levels out of it. Okay. And so that is a huge problem. And they have been unable to do that. As far as we know, they have not said they ever produced syngas in any kind of amount. We have a researcher working with us who said that she has scoured the trade journals and all of the other applicable sources that would be able to report, what they've sold, and it's not there. It's non-existent. And so we know that they're struggling trying to keep their emissions in the minor category, which means that if they go into a major category, which means they'll be polluting more, they're going to have to employ a lot more environmental equipment to control the emissions. So I think that they're
Can I
having.
ask a question? Like,
Yes.
so, I mean, I'm so like, intrigued by this process that
Yeah,
seems kind of sketchy, as I said.
it
So,
is.
so they take the garbage and then they do what to? How do they distill it? Are they treating it with something? They're not. Are they burning it? Are they changing it into, like, when you say turning it into gas? Do you mean a gaseous um, material, and then capturing that gas and distilling it? Is that it? I seem to remember some kind of discussion of that talk, some years ago. But is that what they're doing here? And they're taking all garbage, and that's right, or is it just recyclable stuff?
No, all garbage, which, is problematic in itself because all garbage gets real gloppy. And how do you
Yeah.
separate out, what you want to have in there to create a consistent feedstock? I don't know how, but they've got a big plant in Reno, outside of Reno, Nevada, in Sierra, Nevada, and it's very beautiful. And if you go on their website, you can see pictures of it, and they've got conveyor belts, and they've got the garbage coming in, and they're doing all this stuff, but they still haven't been able to do what they need to do, which is produce syn fuel. What they do is they have a sorting process, and they take out what they want for their to put together their what they call their feedstock, and that would be 30% plastic and other combustibles. But they have to have the plastic in there, otherwise they will not be able to turn it into a gas, because only plastic gets hot enough that it can be turned into a gas. So they 30% plastic, this is what they say, and all this other stuff. So they compress it, and then they turn it into something, as their PR guy says, it looks like confetti. When he came to the Gary City Council, he just threw it up in the air. Oh, it looks like
We'll use it
confetti.
at celebrations.
A celebration, like a Mardi Gras,
Yeah.
celebration. Yeah, so it does look like confetti. It actually kind of looks like insulation. Ugh. Anyway, that's what it is. And then they truck that in. Now, that would be done outside of Gary, because the city council said, no, you're not doing that in the city. So they said, okay, we'll do it outside the city. They still don't have a place to do it yet. And then they would be trucking it in every day with 120 trucks a day in and a day 120 out. So it's 240 trucks in and out of the city every day, every day. uh, and so then they put it into a closed system of gasification. And that is it's called a biorefinery. And it's a series of pipes that the feedstock would be fed into, and then it is ignited. The pipes are ignited by gas, natural gas, that heats up the feedstock and turns it into magically syngas. But they have been unable to do that at their Reno plant that we know of. Now, if they've done it, they're not saying they've done it. They've done something else, but they have not created syngas. And what syngas is, this gas will go to the airline industry, much in the same way as when we go and put gas in our car. Part of it is 10% is ethanol, and that's supposed to, decrease the fossil fuel footprint of all these
Okay.
cars. Well, this is the same thing where uh, they will blend the syngas with regular fuel and then sell it to the airlines as a sustainable fuel that will presumably cut down the emissions off of jet airplanes and make life in the skies more sustainable and better. But you know, as what probably will happen is that the airlines will use that as a reason to fly even more schedules because now they're polluting less, presumably. But our problem with it is that, okay, the airlines get to sound as if they are creating a greener, more sustainable world. In the meantime, what you're doing to us is creating more problems because of the pollution that you are creating with the trucks and with the emissions that you will be putting into our air here, in addition to the danger that such a plant that is highly problematic, since it just really hasn't been done before in any kind of way. And you're kind of tampering with the idea of polluting or doing something very terrible to the water source for millions of people if there should be, an explosion or something like that. And we know that there have
Or
been two
fire.
explosions, yeah, or a fire, yeah, two fires in Indiana recently with people who are dealing with plastic, pure plastic. Now, they're not saying they're going to be doing pure plastic, but they have enough plastic there that it is a matter of concern. So we don't buy what they're saying at all. And again, it's interesting because the mayor that is supporting Fulcrum he didn't campaign on Fulcrum at all. Didn't campaign on the jobs or the revenue or anything. Did not mention Fulcrum in any of his literature. So I guess everyone is kind of waiting to see what they do, because when they came to the city council several years ago, oh yeah, we'll be up and running by 2023. Well, here we are, and nothing has happened. They still haven't gotten on the horse to take them out of Reno. And we also know that they're looking for other operations to begin in the UK, in Louisiana, in Texas, because as they state in their investor advisements on the SEC filings, where they have to tell investors, what the potential problems could be with this industry, that they need to have a number of plants operating at the same time. Otherwise, because this fuel is expensive to produce, that they can't do it with just one or two plants. They have to have a number of plants operating at the same time. So the idea that they were going to give us money, they said 8 to 10 million a year. Of course, that's not really huge anyway. Plus, it's in a TIF zone, which means that all the money would stay in that area, the tax dollars. And also, they can't say that to us, that they can say that they can guarantee that we would get that level of money, because they don't have these other plants operating. And so the whole thing is like a house of cards, but we still have to play this thing out and challenge them at every level, which we have been doing.
That is, and it's hard and it's amazing work that you're doing. And it takes a long time. All this takes a long time. I think so. When we talk about these kinds of industries, I think one basic principle of chemistry, and it should be remembered that, things don't go away when you change their form. They just change form. When you burn something, it doesn't go away. It just changes it into a gas or a vapor, if depending on how much you heat it. And so this notion that we can make all this garbage go away because we're going to run it through a series of pipes and burn it, even at a high temperature, you will still create toxic emissions. That's I mean, the case down in Richmond, where it was a recycling storage facility, and they had just ground up plastic that was, I guess, headed to some other recycling processing industry, but it caught fire. Truck happened to be next to it, a truck trailer that caught fire, caught the entire place on fire, and the fumes, the toxic fumes, because of that plastic burning, are so unbelievably dangerous. I mean, thousands of people had to be evacuated. Who knows where that will land? I mean, and unfortunately, that case too, they found there was asbestos in the mix. That is just so frighteningly dangerous. It takes one asbestos fiber in your lungs to cause an asbestos-related disease. So it is just shocking what these plastic recycling and grinding and storage facilities are allowed to do. The one in Richmond, Indiana, had gotten all kinds of warnings that it was a fire hazard. The way it was set up, nothing was done to clean it up or make it safe, and now it's just a complete disaster. And of course, in that case too, unfortunately, when they went to try to put the fire out, all of that water that they sprayed on it went right into the storm sewers.
Yeah.
So, they didn't do anything to, you can put, the dams out there to stop it and absorb it. They didn't do that. So now they're facing a whole nother, safe water crisis in that
Mhm.
area. So this is, kind of what, we're asking for up here, when you're working with these plastics. And of course, there's a case in East Palestine as well, which was, it was toxic chemicals used to make plastic. That's what exploded and burned and created this a whole other health hazard in Ohio. So, and poor Ohio, because they happen to be, downwind of the Richmond fire as well. So,
Absolutely.
so
Cincinnati and Dayton were on red alert when it happened. And don't forget about Ashley, Indiana, outside of Fort Wayne, that they were burning pure plastics there. They were given the go ahead by the state. The state gave them $185 million in tax exempt bonds to get started this company. They had an agreement that they would start another plant in Macon, Georgia, which eventually collapsed because Macon, Georgia said, no, we don't want you here because you haven't ever produced a product and you had a big fire. And so why would we want you here? So, and that's good that Macon, Georgia at least had the good sense to say, we're not going to fall for your propaganda that you're going to create jobs and revenue and the people be damned, the people's well-being be damned. So yes, and we just don't, for instance, Fulcrum got $500 million in tax exempt bonds from the Indiana Finance Authority, the same state agency that gave Brightmark the money. And so
and Brightmark was the company in Ashley, right?
in Ashley, yes. And so Fulcrum, that gave energy to them because they had been on the stock market. They were able to sell about $400 million worth of stock, mostly the airlines, to get their Reno plant up and running to finance that. But after that, they got out of the stock market, and then, what do we do? So somehow they were able to figure out that Indiana, because it is so, compliant with business and looking the other way, especially to polluting businesses, they were able to come here and get $500 million from this IFA fund in tax exempt bonds. And then that put them on a whole different footing. Now we have the money to do this, so let's do this. So, but we're still waiting for them to do something. Now, there's a couple things that I want your listeners to know. And I'm going to put my glasses back on, so I look.
Quite all right.
Yeah, but they filed. They issued their. I mean, they wrote their air permit and sent it to IDEM, and IDEM said, sure, go ahead. So we looked at it, and we had our experts look at it, and this is what we found, that they never define the composition of the feedstock. They referred to it 62 times, but they never say it exactly what the materials would be to make up the 1,650 tons of garbage that it would use per day at the plant. So this is an unknowable, which means that, going to our second point.
Can you say it again? Is it 1,600 tons of garbage a day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. This is going to be a huge plant. Yeah. On some 50 acres on our lakefront. Yes. And then that takes us to the second part of this, which is a Fulcrum's emissions calculations are unsupported by any test results or corroborating data. Fulcrum's application failed to show the basis for its emissions calculations. How do you do that? How do you put an air permit together saying this is what we're going to emit without any kind of documentation? Instead, it offered emissions projections based on incomplete or unsupported guarantees from a set of potential vendors from other companies, without indicating which of those manufacturers, if any, he plans to use. Now, they've said this all along. Their PR guy, Mr. Van Ewijk, has told me over and over in person and on the phone, when I ask about a hazard analysis, will you conduct a hazard analysis so that we know the level of safety that you can guarantee to our citizens? No, we will not, because our plants are based on the construction of them, and the component parts have proprietary agreements with the manufacturers of those component parts that they will not disclose the outcome of their component parts. So therefore, this is why they put unsupported guarantees from a set of potential vendors. In other words, they're going back to the company and saying, if you use this piece to construct this part, to construct your process, this is what the emission level will be. But then how can they say that? Because what is the company using as the basis for calculating what it says the emissions would be? The basis for it is the product that you're putting into it, which is the feedstock, which is the garbage. And since the garbage is inconsistent, everything about all of this has no basis. So that's what we are in court with about right now. We're arguing over.
You have filed an appeal against the permit that IDEM issued. And and I understand ELPC is helping you with that. Terrific organization.
Yes.
So your claim to appeal that permit is that that they have not provided the necessary supporting data to make the claims. I see.
Yeah.
Yes. Good.
They're just saying this is what we're telling you. This is what the manufacturers, the companies that we are working with are telling us. No, it's supposed to come out of their Reno plant. In addition to which, the Reno plant is like 1/3 the size of what they're projecting in Gary. So how can it be applicable, whatever they do there? But I guess at some level it could be, but the real problem is what is the composition of the feedstock, which they just can't get to be consistent. For what reason? Because garbage is not consistent. every truck has a different load in it. And
Right. And
I'd
that
also
does
like,
really feed into the whole problem of the process and, and
yeah,
what that process will actually be, which makes
yeah.
perfect sense. I mean, I just want to add though that, the veil of proprietary information is, that is such a dangerous, we have to become a society that does not allow, proprietary claims to
Mhm.
supersede the health risks to
Right.
humans. That's how PFAS got into the system. It was, the
Mm.
PFAS were not on the TSCA, on the Toxic Substance Control Act list because the construction of it was proprietary
Yeah.
and it was not known, and now we will all suffer with these forever chemicals that are in
Yes.
all of our bodies now. So likewise, when someone comes along with this proprietary process and says, well, we don't have to tell you,
Right.
how do we say, well, okay, yeah, just go ahead and do it no matter the health risk? So the other thing I want to
Exactly.
mention too is the
Uh-huh.
EPA's proposal to have more health impact assessments
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
on
I'd like to talk about
approvals.
that. I'd like to
Okay.
talk about that because they have a new draft national strategy to that deals with plastic pollution, to prevent plastic pollution. And I'm just going to say that this is what it says in their draft policy, that activities that convert non-hazardous solid waste to fuels or fuel substitutes, i.e. plastics to fuel, or for energy production to be, quote, recycling activities. In making this decision, the EPA notes that it is aware of the potential health risks from such processes known as chemical recycling. And that is what Fulcrum proposes, chemical recycling. And that it will require initial testing for approval and ongoing testing to ensure, quote, there is no variability in the plastic waste stream. Now, I don't see how uh, Fulcrum can guarantee that there's no variability in the plastic waste stream.
Right.
I don't know how you do that. But anyway, so according to Doreen, the EPA is saying that gasification processes like the one Fulcrum proposes for Gary are not green recycling, as they claim, but may in fact adversely impact the environment, the communities in which they're located. Fulcrum says that approximately 30% of their feedstock will be plastic. All plastics contain toxic chemicals like dioxin,
Mhm.
and these chemicals will be emitted in some way during their process. Fulcrum can now expect to face additional scrutiny on this issue. And I would say that our press release, we're being cautious in using the words additional scrutiny because this is big. This is really, really big, saying you can't get away with greenwashing anymore. You're not green. Your process includes plastics, and any process that includes plastic is going to be overseen. And I'm sure that the EPA is responding to all the recent developments from Brightmark to Richmond to what's
Yeah.
going on in Gary in terms of plastics, but all over the country.
Right.
So we were very glad to know that this proposal is being circulated in the EPA. I'm very glad when it gets out of draft form and becomes, enacted. But the fact that there will be oversight and they will, what they sounds like they're saying is that, you won't be allowed to do this unless you can prove the that there's no variability in the plastic waste stream. And I don't know how they can do that,
Well, and
unless they're,
let's hope too. I mean, let's hope EPA does proceed too with
yeah,
requiring, just like the NEPA, requires environmental impact studies on all kinds of industries. I mean, road building, everything. The new idea is to also require a health impact assessment
yes.
as part of, and frankly, as part of the NEPA process. So,
Mhm.
and so let's hope that comes through. I mean, but I do want to address, the notion that um, I think our country wants to reward, entrepreneurial initiatives that do try to address the problem of having all of these plastics laying around, and to do something with them. And so that leaves this kind of opportunity for people like this and, these kinds of industries to get ahead of themselves and not really understand, the impact of what they're doing. And so tell us then, Carolyn, what
Yeah.
is the solution? What are we going to do about plastic?
Yeah. Well, I think we're talking about two things. We're talking about how do we build a sustainable country? I'm not going to say world because I can't speak for the world, but how do we do that? And then what do we do about plastics, period? First of all, we have to stop making so many plastics,
Right.
single use, we have to, the plastics industry, which is fueled literally by the fossil fuel industry because you make plastics from oil, right? And so they are pushing this. This is fossil fuels in another form. And I mean, they are really they have huge lobbies, in Congress, and they have tons of money. And the gas and oil industries are mighty. And I think the only way to deal with them is to have very, very is to move in a green way. That the Green New Deal is very important in terms of people understanding why we need to move in that direction, and that's going to take a while, obviously. And the fossil fuel people are not just going to go away, but those industries ultimately have to be converted to industries that serve the needs of people, the needs of communities, and not just make money for corporations. I don't know what the path is, but we have to have a sustainable direction to go, and we have to convert what we're doing now and supporting also, the subsidies that go to oil companies and cleaning up their spills and everything. That has to go into looking at solar and wind and thermal and those kinds of industries that are important in terms of turning the corner. But I also want to say there are ways that like a city like Gary can become a more sustainable place and not have to give into the idea that we'll just take anything. We can rebuild our city. We can rebuild homes. We can renovate. We can build homes. We can build affordable housing. We can build, and we really need to have more medical facilities. We need a new school. These are all sustainable ways of changing a community's prospects because they have a ripple effect. When you build a school or a hospital, there are obviously jobs in the building and construction, but then it has a ripple effect because the people who work there continue to work there, and then people who come there, support it, and so it's a ripple effect, and it's circular, and it builds the community. So we have to think more in terms of putting our money and our focus on sustainable projects. Urban farming is really, really, really important.
Well, and in many communities, and Gary's a little different because they have the giant steel mills with a lot of employees. But in many communities, hospitals and or schools are the biggest employers. So
Yes.
they are very, viable, opportunities to create jobs in communities, good jobs, good paying jobs, good,
Yes.
Union jobs, and jobs that will, grow communities, from the bottom up and the middle out, as Joe Biden likes to say. So I
Yeah.
would like to say about plastics, though, it has always
Yeah.
struck me, over the years, I think it was Rachel Carson who famously said there's not been a pesticide introduced that hasn't been outlawed within 50 years.
Wow.
And it's, if you kind of apply that to plastic, why hasn't plastic been outlawed? Again, it's mostly because of the fossil fuel industries who are, supporting legislators, and because in Indiana we saw, when local communities wanted to outlaw plastic grocery bags, the state passed law saying no, you can't do that. And the same goes for outlawing locally other kind of one-use plastics. And so I think that is, what needs to happen. We need to be able to have control of, the amount of plastics that are going into the waste stream. And
Mhm.
our state legislature, of course, has not been on board with that at all, has gone the opposite direction. But that's really where I think the fight should be, is trying to keep those plastics out of the waste stream. So, okay, so we have talked a long time, Carolyn, and you have
Yeah.
given us such a wealth of information. And I'm so grateful for your coming on and giving us all this information. And of course, it really inspires a lot of hope for Gary. There's just, it's a lot to overcome. What Gary has been through is just a lot, and it's a lot to overcome. But, but I really know that with people like you around, and Doreen, my good friend Doreen, and others, in GARD, and other great, community members over there in
Yes.
Gary, that there really is some hope. So,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, we are the city of hope. Absolutely, absolutely. We are the mother of the region and will remain so. And so you can't get rid of us.
that's terrific. All right. Well, with that, we'll sign off, and with that great hopeful message at the end. So, so thank you so much, Carolyn, for joining me. I hope we'll keep in touch, and
Yes.
we'll bring updates as they come along.
Okay, Deb, thank you.